Here's one that I get asked quite a bit is, can I use my favorite Beyonce song as the intro to my podcast? Or can I just play a clip of it in my podcast? Or can I just use it as an example? Or any other type of licensed music? Can you? I've got that answer coming up next. Hello, fellow podcaster. My name is Shannon Hernandez, radio broadcaster, podcaster, and podcast producer. And today we are talking all about licensed and copyrighted music. And before we jump into today's topic, I should note that I am obviously not a lawyer. And I would suggest that you seek some type of legal advice, legal help when it comes down to deciding whether or not you should use licensed and copyrighted music in your podcast. And I guess you could say that that really tells you what this video is going to be all about. But I really did want to share some examples of copyrighted music in podcasting so that you can get an idea of why music is either being used in certain podcasts or why you shouldn't be using it. Now, of course, in all my years of being in the radio, we have this ability to play music on the radio station, of course, like many radio stations around the nation do. And all those radio stations that are able to transmit on some type of transmitter have all purchased some type of license. Now, that license that is purchased, at least what I've seen and what I've heard in my years of being in radio, is an ASCAP or a BMI license. And that gives radio stations the ability to play music on their FM or AM band and, pay royalties out to the artists and musicians that are being played on that particular radio station. Now that you have a podcast and you're like, I want to play some music on my podcast that is one of the top pop hit songs that's out on the radio right now, can you do that? Should you do that? Now, as a podcaster, are you able to acquire a BMI or an ASCAP license? And yes, you are able to acquire that, but it's going to cost you money. And the licenses that I know that radio stations put out, and of course the TV stations that actually utilize music, those actually cost quite a bit of money. Will it cost you, the podcaster, a lot of money to acquire an ASCAP or BMI license? Well, I would recommend that what you do is you head on over to ASCAP.com. That's ASCAP.com. I'll leave a link down in the description below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can go to BMI.com. And you should be able to find whether or not you can license music. Now, you can license music if you are, say, a business owner or someone who owns a restaurant, or someone who owns a bar. Maybe you have a website where you want to feature certain music on your website that has to pay out for royalties. You can definitely purchase that license, but it may cost quite a bit. I don't know how much it costs for a radio station, and I don't know how much it costs for an independent podcaster such as us. So you'll want to research that. It is just something that I really haven't gone into and looked into, and I prefer not to look into ASCAP BMI licensing because I prefer to not use any copyrighted material and violate any type of copyright infringement for any podcast that I am producing. So that is just something that you might want to think about. Now, an example of copyright infringement, and it happens to the best of us, and sometimes it happens to the most popular people out there. An example of that would be Senator John McCain when he was running for president in 2008. And when he was going out and he was giving his stump speeches, he was using a Foo Fighter song called My Hero. And of course, we all know John McCain being the war hero and all that, and it seemed like a fitting song. And every time he got out and got ready to give his stump speech, that song played. Well, being that there's a little bit of a political play here on both sides, Dave Grohl, being a Democrat, saw this and didn't want his song being used by John McCain. And of course, he called, he called I'm calling you out button. He hit that calling out button and he said, hey, John, I don't want you using this song. It infringes on the copyrights. And where are my royalties for you using that song? So to honor the copyright infringement, John McCain went ahead and said, no, we're not going to use that. I respect copyright and the music that is being created by these artists. So he went ahead and stopped doing that. Now, I know what you might be asking yourself. You might be saying, well, I'm a small-time podcaster. I'm not like John McCain or anyone else that's out there. I mean, is it really going to matter? I would say yes, it is going to matter, because even if your podcast is small and it's getting a certain amount of downloads and it's not certainly in the millions, it is going to be a podcast that is growing. And if you stick with your podcast over time, your podcast will get tons of downloads and it will garner attention over time. And if you think someone right now is turning the other cheek to say, it doesn't really matter, it's a small time podcast, what happens whenever your podcast does become big? What happens whenever that person does turn back around and say, where are my royalties for using that particular Metallica song or that particular AC/DC song? Where are the royalties for that music? I didn't get any, and that podcast is wildly popular. So it's something to certainly think about whenever you do create your podcast. Should you be using that type of music? Now, if you're using music that is from an independent artist, that independent artist can give you permission to use their music. So that could be like local bands, it could be a local musician, and as long as they're giving you some type of permission and it's not licensed under the ASCAP BMI umbrella, you should be okay. But again, I would seek legal advice and make sure that everything is kosher to put onto your podcast. Now, you also might be saying, well, I've heard other podcasts using licensed and copyrighted music in their podcast. I mean, if they're getting away with it, why can't I get away with it? First things first is I wouldn't compare myself to other podcasts. That's not a really good idea to really do that. You can listen to other podcasts to get good ideas, but I wouldn't follow their formula because they may or may not have purchased an ASCAP or a BMI license. That's just something to think about. And is it something that is really worth it for you? I mean, we already know that you're purchasing a lot of equipment for your podcast if you want to really step up the game. So you might want to just kind of stay on the side of caution. Just don't use copyrighted music. One more question might be, someone's using a clip. They're using a clip in their podcast, and it's okay. It might be okay. It's just 5 seconds, and I've heard that it's okay. Just stay away from copyrighted music altogether. I would much rather stay away from the copyrighted music as opposed to playing a 5-second clip and getting charged or fined a couple $1,000s for just playing a 5-second clip. It's not worth your time. Now, I have a really good example of who uses copyrighted music in their own podcast, but they have permission. That is actually over on my blog. I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to the blog down below in the comments section, so you might want to go check that out. And it shares with you the example of who uses copyrighted music in their podcast. So you're saying to yourself, well, Shannon, where do I get my music from? Where can I can't even use music anymore? What the heck? Yes, you can use your music. And of course, you've heard it on every other podcast that is out there. Sometimes, like I said, it's from independent musicians who are willing to make music for you, or you go get royalty-free music. The royalty-free music websites that are out there that I consider the ones that are my favorites are Audio Jungle, which is number one. Audio Jungle has a number of unique musical beds and themes that you can use for your podcast. AudioJungle.net is where you need to go. And royalty-free music is usually purchased per song or per song that or instrumental that has been created, and it can range anywhere between $10 to $45. Sometimes you can get packs of music that might cost you a lot more. Sometimes you can just get one song and it might cost you $10. But it does give you the right to use that music, and you don't have to pay royalties out every time that you play it. There are rules that go with royalty-free music, and you might want to read Audio Jungle's website and their terms and conditions of what royalty-free music entails, but that is the best way to go ahead and find music for the theme of your particular podcast. They also have sound effects. They have all kinds of different sounds that you can purchase right there on AudioJungle.net. So I know all of this is a lot of information, especially if you're a beginner and you're starting a podcast, and that's completely okay. I have a quick start guide that you can check out and download right now for free over on my website at theshanman.com. I'll leave that link in the description down below, or I'll make it fly out maybe right here or somewhere above. And of course, it's going to be at the end screen. So now that we have our copyrighted music, now what do you need to do in terms of creating the podcast? What is it going to take for you to create a podcast for your company or maybe for your organization? And how should you be able to protect yourself? I got a really great video that I think you should check out. It's over here on the left-hand side, and it might answer some of your questions when it comes down to creating a podcast for a company so you can protect yourself. If you have any questions, go ahead, leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to like this video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and share this video with all your other podcast friends who are looking to start a podcast. Thanks for watching.